Welcome to the Fanatics View Hockey Show. My name is James Lynch. As you know, the last couple weeks we've been covering teams during the offseason, and no one better to cover the Edmonton Oilers. That's what we're going to be talking about here today than my guy Avry. You know him, freelance writer. He's basically the equivalent of me in the hockey world, but he works for some really big outlets, including SI Now and the Hockey News. Avery, good to talk to you again, man. We were just talking off air. It's been, 10 years or something like that since we last spoke?
Yeah, it's been a very long time, James, since we were both living back in Toronto.
That's right. Yeah, I know. Exactly. Making both of us feel old here. But let's get right into it because, and we'll talk about some stuff, obviously, on the channel with Fanatics View a little bit later. But I'm glad I got you on this week. I wanted to get to the Oilers at some point, but then last week, out of nowhere, we get this offer sheet. Obviously, Philip Broberg, Dylan Holloway, offer sheeted by St. Louis as of yesterday. And again, this is great timing for the show. Edmonton declining to, tender either player in this situation. Were you surprised by that? What was your reaction to Edmonton moving past both these players?
I was very surprised that they moved past both because one thing the Oilers are now, they're now the oldest team in the league. They've lost a lot of youth. They lost a lot of speed because guys like Dylan Holloway, Warren Fogle, Ryan McLeod have left this offseason. And then you now have Broberg and Holloway, now members of the St. Louis Blues. To me, it's a little bit surprising to see this team become the oldest team in the league very quickly, very soon in the offseason. Now, looking at these guys, I thought Dylan Holloway last season played well when called upon. I know he didn't get the most minutes, but when called upon, he was a very reliable guy in the third line situations, at times playing second line minutes, stepped up in a major way during the Cup finals against Florida. And for Philip Broberg, he's someone who his development was a little bit iffy at times for a guy who was taken top 10 overall in the draft. You saw his game develop more and more. But I was less surprised to see them match on Broberg. He's someone who I think they are fine letting leave eventually. They're fine not matching that deal. The Holloway one, I think, will hurt a little bit more, considering the fact you're losing a very speedy, very physical guy who could play in your top six. I think it's going to hurt this team going forward now, James.
I was surprised too. And again, this is just from like a guy who, I mainly follow the Canucks a lot, obviously, because I live here in Vancouver. But I would notice Holloway out there. Like he was a guy that I thought, wow, this was a good pick for Edmonton. So when I saw the offer, first off, even before the offer sheets happened, I knew there was going to be an issue with the Oilers cap because obviously they needed to sign these two RFAs. That was something I was keeping tabs on the RFAs for the Canucks mainly because of Filip Hronek, right? That was the big one for us where it's like, are they going to be able to keep him? Is he going to get traded? What's going on? And then I noticed Broberg and Holloway and I'm like, that could be a bit tricky because obviously the Oilers went out and signed Jeff Skinner and Arvidsson, and we'll talk about those moves in a sec because I actually like both those moves for them. But when I saw the offer sheets, my first thought was, okay, that's too much for Philip Broberg. Because I remember last year there was, he was a healthy scratch and there was, issues of his development in Edmonton. And I thought, okay, this is one because they gave him a pretty big contract. Now I understand, obviously he's a defenseman. That's a hot commodity in the league. But I thought that number for a guy who really hasn't proven a lot, that was a bit surprising. The Holloway one, I thought, okay, they'll bring him back. And then when they traded Cody Ceci to free up some cap room, I thought, okay, they're going to bring Holloway back, and they didn't. And then when I saw they traded for Vasily Podkolzin from the Canucks, we'll talk about that too. I'm like, okay, well, maybe they just want some extra I don't know. But yeah, I'm with you. Like, I was surprised they didn't keep Holloway just because, again, maybe the number's a little bit more than they wanted cap-wise, but he's also a very dynamic player and someone that you've developed in your system. It's like, I don't know, like trying to bring in someone new, like we might as well get into the Podkolzin thing because essentially he is kind of their replacement. What did you make of him coming over to the team? You didn't give up much. As a Canucks fan, I was pretty disappointed. We only got a 4th round pick, although his stock has not been lower. But what do you make of the Podkolzin move?
Yeah, to me, that screamed to me, this is your replacement for Dylan Holloway. And he's someone I know in Vancouver. His time hadn't really worked out. He was, again, supposed to be a guy who's supposed to be a part of that young core. I mean, he's only 23 years old. He's not old, but I know in Vancouver, you guys want to see a little bit more out of him in terms of a skilled forward. He only has 35 points, and he's played almost 140 NHL games, so it's not what you want to see. So maybe Chris Nobel and company can help jumpstart his career. But I do find surprising, though, that Vancouver did trade him to a divisional rival. If any team, if you're Vancouver, if you're San Jose, the team you don't want to help right now is Edmonton if he does get his career going now as an Oiler.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I look at this a couple different ways. When they signed Daniel Sprong, I thought, okay, well, I think the way the Canucks saw it is they brought in Sprong, maybe a bit surprising that he was still on the market, and they got him for a really low contract. He was essentially the replacement there because it's already a crowded forward group as it is with some of the signings with Kiefer Sherwood and Denton Heinen. And I think, I had Dave Hall in here a couple weeks ago, and I figured they'd at least give him till camp and see what he could show. But I also see the other side of it where if they were to let Podkolzin go and it didn't work out, you'd probably have to put him on waivers. Like, at least now they get ahead of it and get something for him. Because realistically, like a fourth, I was kind of thinking about it a bit more. Like, you're not going to get a first for him. You're not going to get a second for him. A third would be really pushing it for a guy who really hasn't proven himself. So I almost look at this as like a low risk move here for Edmonton. Like, if he works out, it could work out great. If it doesn't, it's a fourth round pick. I'd have to go look at the stats, but a lot of fourth round picks don't end up being like, they're not like a guarantee, right? So, but yeah, that's the part that hurts the most, I think, for Canucks fans, is like, he's going to Edmonton. Like, what if he works out? It would be a very Canuck thing for like them to trade this first round pick, who, by the way, was taken. This was a big debate a couple years ago. Is like they could have taken Cole Caulfield, and they opted to take, or I don't know if Caulfield, I think, was like right around his number. I'm going to double check that, but I just remember there was like this debate of like whether or not the Canucks should have gone that route to draft him. And remember when he was drafted as well, he was going to be in Russia for the first little bit, so it's like you had to wait anyways, and it was another, unfortunately, blunder on the resume of Jim Benning throughout his tenure that just hasn't really worked out as well. One of the things too with Podkolzin that I'm interested in, a lot of it was mental. I think you could see the physical abilities there. You could see and he had some bad luck too. There was a period where he was in the AHL where he took a really big hit and was out for a lot of the season. So there was just some bad luck involved there. But I'm wondering if Knobloch, of all people, can get into his head and get him playing confident, and it could work out well for you. Like, again, we sort of talked about there, a bit of a low risk situation there, as I'm kind of rambling on about Podkolzin. But let's go about some of the other signings there. Arvidsson and Jeff Skinner. I really like the Jeff Skinner one. I think that's going to complement the Oilers very well. They seem to be able to find these veteran players in like certain situations, like they did a couple years ago with the Vander Kane. How impressed were you with some of the moves the Oilers made in the offseason prior to Stan Bowman getting hired? We'll get to that later too.
Yeah, no, bringing in Arvidsson and Skinner, I thought were two of these smarter moves the offseason. I especially like Jeff Skinner. He's someone who I've been a big fan of Jeff's game ever since he came into the league with Carolina. He's always found a way to be that 25, 35 goal guy, consistently putting up those 75, 80 point years. Hasn't made the postseason. Probably going to change now with him being an Oiler on this 1 year deal. You got to make the playoffs eventually if you're Jeff Skinner, because that's just a really weird streak he's been on for his entire career, playing as a Hurricane and a Buffalo Sabre. But no, he's a guy I think he's going to fit in nicely, playing in that top six for Edmonton. He's going to give this team even more scoring in that top six unit. People say, oh, what do you need another scorer for in Edmonton? I don't think you can have enough scoring, especially when it gets down to the nitty gritty when it comes to the postseason. Having now Connor McDavid, Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, Leon Draisaitl, and Jeff Skinner, that is a scary unit up front. That's very scary.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, like, I like the moves from the Oilers here, and I know people will say, oh, well, this is the reason you couldn't keep Broberg and Holloway. You're getting a Jeff Skinner who, again, was like a leader on a team. Like, even with Buffalo, I know he had some ups and downs, but to just get that type of scoring. And Arvidsson, I think the only concern with Arvidsson, and I'm sure you'll agree with me here, is the injuries, right? If he's healthy, he will be a huge force, and that's going to look like a really good contract. But if he's not healthy, at least you have a guy like Skinner and some other offensive firepower on that team that'll sort of help out with the scoring.
No, exactly. You're entirely true. And yeah, if Arvidsson is healthy, he'll be a major player in this Edmonton unit. We saw him have big moments before around the league with LA, with Nashville. And this was also a time in which Edmonton, and this is also showing too how Edmonton is becoming a destination more so now than it was 8-9 years ago. Because guys, you didn't get an offseason where guys like an Arvidsson, Jeff Skinner were truly considering an Edmonton back when they were in the decade of darkness, still playing in Rexall Place during the peak jersey tossing era. You weren't getting this now. Now players are seeing Edmonton consistently making the playoffs, winning rounds. And those old tropes are dying out now the more that this team wins. Guys like Arvidsson and Skinner are saying, you know what? I have a chance to win here. Why not give it a shot for a year or two?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, I went back and looked at the 2019 draft. This is just so depressing. So Podkolzin was taken number 10. You know who's available after this? Matt Boldy, Spencer, Spencer Knight, he's a great goalie, but I mean, like, that's, Canucks are fine with goalie. But Cole Caulfield was 15th. Like, how do you miss that? I don't know. It's just that one kind of, and this is just par for the course in Vancouver. Of course, the year they took for Tannen and Jared McCann, who, they ended up picking the wrong guy. Remember, they traded McCann shortly after that. And yeah, anyway, so just reminiscing and how badly that the drafting has been in Vancouver. So we were sort of talking about cap space. The Cody Ceci trade, my understanding is that they traded Ceci because, again, we thought maybe they're going to try and bring both guys back with the trade. That was always some rumors, is that Ceci was going to be out of there. So I have kind of a two-part question. First question is, do you think they're going to miss those minutes? Because obviously I know they brought in, the trade brought back Edmondson from San Jose. So he's more of an AHL guy. I know he did have some history with Knobloch over there with Hartford back when I believe he was coaching them there or something along those lines. So he'll sort of take up some of those minutes. But are you a bit concerned that, they're tinkering a bit with the defense and, yes, they get the cap space. My understanding is they just want to have flexibility throughout the season with cap space too. So that's kind of my two-part question. Do you think they'll miss the minutes from Ceci? And second, are you assuming they're going to use that cap space to maybe either make some moves during the season or just, acute cap space throughout the season?
I do think eventually they will try to make a move to bring somebody on the back end, because you're really relying now heavily on Matthias Ekholm, Evan Bouchard, Darnell Nurse, and now it's going to be Ty Emerson and Brett Kulak. And those gonna have to eat up a lot of minutes until you get somebody else to help out. I know people have suggested maybe trading for Rasmus Anderson to try and help some things out. And I like Ty Emerson. He was a highly coveted D-man. He's someone who played really well. He mentioned in Hartford with Chris Knobloch. He was a solid AHL D-man. So I want to see what he can do at the AHL level, playing for more minutes, playing on a third pairing. He had 10 points in 30 games last year for the San Jose Sharks on a team that was atrocious for most of last year. So I want to see what he can do on a team that wants to win and wants to win pretty soon. But yeah, I think they're going to find a way to make a deal. And when it comes to Cody Ceci, I think to an extent, you're going to miss some of what Cody Ceci was able to bring, but when he was playing with a Darnell Nurse, that pairing wasn't a good fit. Him and Darnell Nurse clashed like oil and water in terms of on-ice play. They weren't the right pairing together, so they're not gonna miss him with Darnell Nurse. The thing now for the Oilers is going to be, now for the Oilers, who can we pair with Darnell Nurse? So that Darnell isn't trying to be Mr. Everything. So that Darnell can focus on being that puck-carrying defenseman who has a nose for the net and can play physical.
And we sort of talked about how much I enjoyed what the Oilers have done in the offseason. And it's hard for me to say, Avery, I'll be honest, I'm not an Oilers guy. I'll be honest. And I like the fact that we've had this rivalry now in the playoffs through last year. I mean, that was some of the most entertaining hockey I've ever watched, especially that game one. I was at game one when they came back and won I think it was 6-5 in that game, but really, really good playoff series. But Stan Bowman, before we get into the actual hiring of Stan Bowman, which I think surprised a lot of people, did you ever get any, I saw on Twitter, I know that you were one of the few reporters that actually reached out to the team and tried to get a statement. Was there anything given back as far as a reasoning for bringing in Stan? For those who don't know, obviously Stan Bowman involved in the whole scandal with the Chicago Blackhawks. A lot of people feel like he shouldn't be working in hockey anymore. Was there any sort of feedback from any of the inquiries you made?
Yeah, so to give the full backstory, so I emailed the league, NHL's PR team in terms of, because the NHL put out a statement, Cole's note basically saying that Bowman had gone through different courses and had done things to be reinstated. And I emailed the league wanting to basically say, okay, so Stan Bowman, Joel Quenneville, Alec Isaac are reinstated. What did they do exactly to get back into the league? What exactly made them or put them back in the league's good graces? And I heard nothing. I heard no reply back from the league in terms of one explanation. And at the presser, Jeff Jackson, Stan Bowman, Sheldon Kennedy got into a little bit more in terms of what Bowman did, the work that he had done to an extent in working with players and working with people in hockey to get back into the NHL's good graces. But from my point of view, I was very much in the group of, okay, you're doing the work to show, you're sorry, you should have done better. But that shouldn't mean you're immediately thrust back into a role of power in the hockey world in the NHL when you failed beforehand to protect players.
Yeah, I completely agree. And is this now because, before, there's obviously some moves that the Oilers have made in the past that are kind of along these lines, right? Evander Kane, that was a bit controversial back then with some of the allegations that were going on in his personal life, all that stuff. Corey Perry, right, gets dismissed from Chicago. They bring him in here. Is this now an ownership at this point where it's like they don't seem to really, it seems like they're not afraid to take on controversial people to bring in the team if it means they're going to win some games?
Yeah, no, it's a bit of the rep now, the organization of being a team that, you know what, we'll try and rehabilitate you. We'll try to give you that second and third chance to show that, hey, you can be fixed. But I think to the fan base, a lot of the fan base now, they don't want their reputation. They don't want to be seen as a team that takes in everybody who has a bad reputation, be it for whatever reason. They don't want that reputation. And it's a fair point.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be seen as the place to go and fix your image when you have done something heinous or been accused of doing something heinous. They don't want their reputation. And being in that press conference, James, and seeing their response of Jeff Jackson, seeing how he almost in a way dismissed fans' concerns when they were asked about that at the press conference. I know it was very callous to an extent in terms of how cold the reply was in terms of, hey, give him a chance, give him time. But why should fans have to give him time? Why should fans have to give him that chance when he himself said he failed? Why should fans say, okay, we're going to give you, and just believe what was being said? I thought that was very callous and very cold on Jeff Jackson's part in that press conference.
Well, and the other thing too is like, would this have not been better if Sheldon Kennedy could at least come out and say like maybe the type of work he was doing? Like, I think it's hard to come from Jeff Jackson and Stan Bowman as far as saying the work they've done. If you have someone like Sheldon Kennedy who they actually worked with, if he could come out and maybe at least shed some light on this, I think it would be a little bit more credible, don't you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And Shelly Kennedy was actually there in Edmonton talking about it with reporters and media and trying to shed some light on what Stan Bowman has done. But a good buddy of mine who used to work in media, he made a great tweet saying how if you have to start your press conference with about 10 minutes of apologies, it isn't the right hire.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I know. And again, it's just one of those weird things, that's happened. And Athletic had a great article out, a couple weeks ago about, confidence in the front office. And it's interesting because obviously the Oilers would have been at the top of the list with some of the offseason moves they made. But this hiring of Stan Bowman has kind of put a cloud. The other thing is Stan Bowman's not that great of a GM. I think everyone points back to that trade with, Panarin, right? With Columbus, trading Brandon Saad, right? So that to me, it's like, I don't think it was worth the headache, especially when you have a team like this who is a game away from winning a Stanley Cup. I think it was a bit of a weird move that they went that route. And why have this, surrounding the season with someone that, a lot of people don't want, obviously don't want in the league as well. So yeah, good on you for kind of pressing into that. We got a couple questions. Let's get to these here from Troy. By the way, Troy going to be on the show next week, our Columbus Blue Jackets expert. He says, which lines do you think Arvidsson and Skinner will be on this season? Great question. That's an Avery question here.
That's a great question. Yeah, no, I definitely think these guys are going to be looking at second line roles, possibly first line roles, all depending on how things shake up with Chris Knobloch. I could see, depending on need, these guys in spot duty stepping into the first line, more likely second line. All depends on what Chris Knobloch wants to do or how things go. Of course, knock on wood, you don't want an injury happen, but I could definitely see both guys slipping into a first line role. I definitely could see these guys being power play players, depending on how things go. But yeah, I think these are going to be second line, first line guys. I don't see either guy falling outside the top six in terms of the forward pairings.
Skinner and Arvidsson's underlying shooting stats are off the charts. They should be able to produce while playing with either Connor or Leon. I completely agree. And again, this is all tough for me to say, Avery, as a Canucks fan, but what are you going to do? Realistically, how many seasons do you think the Oilers Cup window is? I'll kind of step in here, and then I want to get your response. I think it really depends on Leon Draisaitl. Like, is he going to stay? There was a report a few weeks ago that there was like an 8-year contract, but nothing's come out of that yet. Is there anything you're hearing about any sort of, are they getting close on a contract with Leon Draisaitl?
Yeah, from what I've heard, in the market, it sounds like they are getting closer, but it's not confirmed yet. And when we talk to Leon, he doesn't want to talk about it right now. Really, for Leon right now, it's more about focusing the season at hand he wants to focus on. But there has been word that they're getting closer and closer to there being a long-term deal. And knowing Leon Draisaitl, he wants to stay here. He likes Edmonton. He's built himself a home here. He's built himself a culture here. And like most athletes, moving sucks. So I don't see Leon wanting to leave immediately, but he's the kind of guy where he wants to find a way to win here. He wouldn't want to leave business unfinished in Edmonton. So I do see him staying here and signing a long-term deal to try and win a cup as an Oiler.
And I think it really comes down to, does he want to be number 2 to McDavid, or does he want to be the guy? And if he wants to be the guy, then that would be understandable if he wants to go elsewhere. There's all these crazy conspiracy theories, like, obviously San Jose's a team that people have talked about because obviously the owner is German, right? So that would kind of fit with Leon. I've heard that theory, and then I've heard, other places. But yeah, I think if I'm a betting man, he's probably going to stay. Why wouldn't you with the core there? And this kind of gets to Troy's next question here about how long the window is. Do you think it's, obviously, like if they lock these guys up, there are a couple 1-year deals. We talked about Skinner and a few other names as well. So I'm guessing, it's really going to depend on who they can keep long-term. Like Nurse is locked up long-term. Evan Bouchard's another name we haven't talked about. Like he's got to get a raise and a contract, as does Draisaitl. I think it's really going to depend how Bouchard and, some of these other names, how they're able to keep everyone together. And that will sort of determine where the future's going. But I think right now it's a bit of a question mark, right?
Oh, totally. Yeah. If they can keep guys like Bouchard, Draisaitl, they keep those key cogs happy. But I think that window is still certainly open for another year, 2 or 3 years. And if you can re-sign a Victor Arvidsson, a Jeff Skinner, that window stays open for a couple seasons more. But I do think if you're the Oilers, you got to find a way to get back to the Cup final again this year. I know it's going to be tough because the Western Conference is tough. It's going to get tougher as the year goes on. But yeah, I think that window is still firmly open for at least 2 more seasons in my mind.
What are you hearing on Evander Kane? The thought is he will go on the LTIR. And then sort of 2-part question of that. How much do you think he was affected by injuries in the playoffs? Because obviously the production wasn't there, but then there's a school of thought that he was playing injured. What are you hearing on Evander Kane?
It's sounding more and more like he probably will be going. He will be missing some time due to the injuries he's had. I know almost all of his tenure, he's battled injuries, the sports hernia, rib injuries, the gruesome wrist injury he had a couple seasons ago where he missed a lot of time and came back early. So it sounds like Evander Kane will miss some time to start the year. And that's going to be, when Evander Kane, when he's on, he's a great player. When he's on, he's on. But Evander Kane banged up has held his team back to an extent. He hasn't played all that well. Even the playoffs, you could see he was playing at maybe 55, 60%. It wasn't fully healthy Evander Kane. And when you're not fully healthy in the postseason, when it's showing, that can hold back a forward unit. So it does appear that he will most likely miss a little bit of time or a certain level of time to start the regular season. How much to be determined? We're not sure yet if it's going to be LTIR. I know Bob Stauffer mentioned him getting surgery, so we will know soon if he is going for sure on LTIR, James.
Let's talk about the Oilers this season. I think they've got better in certain areas, like with the forward group. I think defense, there's maybe some question marks again with trading Ceci and some of the other moves they've made. They also lost Vinny Desharnais, who is now a member of the Canucks. So maybe we could just, in my head, I'll just think, they traded Puck Holzen for Vinny Desharnais. Maybe that makes sense. But I'm looking at the Pacific right now, and I'm curious your thoughts on this. Like if I had to rank, and I know this was a poll question they had on TSN this morning, but I think Oilers are going to end up first. I'm not, as much as, like I said, I'm maybe not the biggest Oilers guy. I can definitely understand the moves they made in the offseason. I see the Canucks as number 2. I don't think Vegas is going to be as good as they've been in years past. They lost a couple key players in the offseason. I think the Kings, they basically gave up Pierre-Luc Dubois for nothing. I don't think they're really going to be in the mix. We know Calgary's rebuilding. The Kraken has made some improvements, but some of those, a couple of those contracts, it's like, I don't know. Although Matty Beniers, I like that one. And then obviously Anaheim and San Jose are rebuilding. So is that kind of how you see the Pacific this year? What are your thoughts on the Oilers and how they will finish the season?
Yeah, I can see Edmonton finishing one this year to win their first division title in over 35 years. But I do think that, Vancouver is going to be right there in second. I think Vegas will be in third. I know Vegas has taken a step back, but I still think the Golden Knights are going to be a team to watch out for. You can never sleep on them. Throughout their entire existence, they've always been in that race. They've always been a contender their entire NHL tenure. So I don't want to say they're going to crash and burn right now this year. Now, Seattle's a team. Seattle's an interesting one. I do see them finding a way under Dan Bosma to bounce back. So I think the Kraken could be that wildcard team. And as for the rest, LA, Calgary, and Anaheim, San Jose, I don't see them doing much. I see them being outside looking in. I think San Jose and Anaheim still have some more work to do before they're really back into a race of being a playoff team. LA's window, to me, I think LA's window is closed. And if you're the Kings, it's tough because you have had that many years in a row of which you're supposed to take the next step, and you keep getting that window slammed in your face by the Oilers. They're that hump you can't get over no matter how hard you try. And unfortunately for the Kings, I think it might eventually cost Rob Blake his job. And when it comes to Calgary, again, Calgary's a similar team in which they should have been better. They should have been far better. But after 21-22, they, to me, come across as a really broken team in the Western Conference, James.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting just how many teams are rebuilding right now, like Calgary, Anaheim, San Jose. Seattle's finally made some moves. I agree with you on Vegas. I could see them finishing in that third spot. The thing with LA is like the way they played last year was so defensive. Like I knew when that first round matchup happened with Edmonton, there's no way they're going to beat Edmonton because you can't play enough defense to contain the offense of Edmonton. Like it's just not going to happen. And I still wonder about their goaltending. Like I know they got Darcy Kemper, and obviously Kemper's been sort of up and down throughout his career, but I don't know if that's the answer. I feel like they have not had a solid goaltender since Jonathan Quick, and that's an area they haven't really addressed. I know there were talks about them getting Allmark, and obviously he's gone to Ottawa. So yeah, I just don't see where Los Angeles has really made any big improvements. And Vegas again, like a healthy Mark Stone, they got Noah Hannafin locked up. That's going to be they'll get a full season with Noah Hannafin, which will be great. But I don't know. I think it's going to be very good. But I actually like all this the way it's setting up because and we got a comment here from Joe here in the comments saying Canucks and Oilers second round match again for the next 3 or 4 years. I love it. That's one thing as a Canucks fan. Like basically since Boston and Chicago, there really hasn't been a good rival, but I think right now both teams are kind of coming into their own, and it's been a lot of exciting hockey, and the good and the bad, take it for what you will, but the Twitter wars have been amazing too. I'm sure you've seen a lot of that too, right? So
oh my gosh, the Twitter battle between the Oilers and Canucks Twitter was just chaos at its highest level, seeing these two fan bases go at it. And of course that series goes 7. Of course Edmonton, Vancouver goes 7, and it was a very entertaining series. The back and forth was fun to watch. And yeah, I definitely think we're going to get a part 2 and a part 3 of Edmonton and Vancouver because those games were entertaining no matter who won.
Before we get you out of here, Avry, again, great stuff here. Good insight here on the Oilers and everything. I did want to talk a little Canucks because some news came out. Well, actually, some news came out this morning too that kind of ties into what I'm going to talk about. So Thatcher Demko, we've heard some rumblings that the Canucks are potentially looking at another goaltender because there's a school of thought that maybe Demko's not going to be ready to start the season, and this is just a nightmare scenario for the Canucks because now it's kind of looking like that Demko is maybe injury prone, right? He's had a couple seasons now where he hasn't been healthy. Obviously, he wasn't ready after the Nashville series due to that knee injury. They're poking around, and there's not a lot of goaltenders available right now. So I guess my question is like, and then they announced this morning, Ian Clark, the goaltending coach, now stepping aside. They've now promoted the goaltending coach from Abbotsford. According to Alvin, it's something that Clark wanted. I don't know if he's wanted to take a reduced role, but that was like a secret weapon with Vancouver. You think of who Ian Clark's developed, including Jacob Markstrom and Thatcher Demko and Archer Seelovs. Like it's all worked out well. So should there be concern for the Canucks, do you think, with this news, or did you see enough of Archer Seelovs last year that you think he can be a regular in the NHL?
From what I saw in that series against Nashville, against Edmonton, I think he has potential. I think, if you go to training camp, you at least give him a chance to be that number one guy. Starting off with Demko can't go. Give him a chance. I think he's earned it. But if he struggles and Demko is still out, that to me is going to be a major concern because in the Western Conference, you need that goaltending to help you out in a tough run in regular season, in the postseason. But I've seen enough of Sheelovs to think, you know what? Give him a chance, and if he is able to hold down the fort and be the number one guy, that's a great thing to see if Demko is still banged up when training camp begins or going into October, November, however long he's out of the lineup for Vancouver.
They just got to figure out that point shot. That was how the Oilers kept scoring those goals in the playoffs. Was he couldn't see the screen shot. It was always that same shot from the point that seemed to get through. So obviously, and I keep forgetting how young he is. It's incredible, like how well he did in such a short period of time. They got Yuri Patera as well. They signed him from Vegas' system. Apparently, they like him a lot. So we'll see if that works. But I'm just worried because it's been a goalie graveyard of backup goaltenders dating back to Jim Benning when they had Braden Holtby and Yaroslav Halak and Spencer Martin, Colin Delia. So I'm hoping they can figure something out. I like Casey DeSmith, but obviously he's with Dallas now. They couldn't come to terms there. So I think that's something to keep an eye on as the season sort of progresses a little bit further. Avry, this was awesome. I really appreciate you coming on here. We definitely got to do this again during the season. I'm sure we will as the two teams are going to be playing against each other a lot. But anything you got coming up, as far as articles or anything you got going on in the world of hockey, by all means, let my audience know and make sure they can follow you on social media as well. I'll plug that too.
So first of all, you can follow me on Twitter at Avry, AVRY, my easy handle to remember. And for the hockey news, I have a feature coming up on NHL 25 and who should be the next cover athlete for NHL 26, 27. There's a few names in there I'm going to throw out. Guys like Leon Draisaitl. I got to mention coming up how Jeremy Swayman and Allmark should be on the cover because, hey, if we're going to have the Hughes brothers, why not put Allmark and Swayman on? Why not? So what if they're on Boston, Ottawa? Be a little bit different. Who cares?
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Avery, thanks so much, man. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll definitely get you back on soon here.
No, of course. Sounds good, James. Thanks for having me.
There we go. That is the man, Avery. So cool getting him on. And again, next week, Troy Nowak, who's in the chat here, we'll have him on next week, talk about the Columbus Blue Jackets, which is a good segue to something I wanted to get into right away here with Patrik Laine getting traded. So definitely got to talk about some news. It's funny, we're in the offseason right now, but the Montreal Canadiens making a big trade for Patrik Laine. Don Waddell getting right to work as new general manager of the Columbus Blue Jackets. And let me just pull up the screen grab here. Thought we'd get into this. And Troy, I want to know your comments on this, but I think this is a good move for both parties. So let me just find the actual trade. I just need an article that shows me the exact trade. It was a defenseman. Daily Faceoff. There we go. Traded for Jordan Harris and a second-round pick. So Columbus having to give up that second-round pick, I'm assuming that's due to the fact that, they wanted to unload that entire salary. There was a school of thought that if Laine was going to get traded, that there would be some salary retention because obviously he comes with an 8.7 cap hit, I believe, for the next 2 seasons. Listen, Montreal has been making a lot of good moves. They have been stocking up draft picks. They've been making, Kent Hughes, I got to be honest, he's been great since taking over for Marc Bergevin. So they get Laine. I don't mind this move because for Montreal, there's not a lot of expectations. And I think for Laine, there's not as much pressure. I think in Columbus, when he came over for Pierre-Luc Dubois, he was sort of seen as someone that needed to be that big, the big name. And then they get Goudreau, and it just hasn't worked out for him there. So I think here, like I said, the expectations aren't as high. He can go there, refine it, find his game. And listen, if it doesn't work out in Montreal, he's only got a couple more seasons. They can move on from that, and they still get a second-round pick of it. Jordan Harris, I'm not entirely familiar with. But he's got a 1.4 million cap hits. Anytime you get a young defenseman, that's always a good move for a team. So but Daily Faceoff thinks it's a D move for them and it's an A move for the Montreal Canadiens. So we'll have to keep an eye on how that works out. But I think this is a good move because, listen, Columbus Blue Jackets, they've had a lot of distractions over the last couple seasons, dating back to last season with the whole Mike Babcock situation. Get this out of the way. Let's not make this a distraction. Let's have a fresh start. They've got a new coach in Dean Evason. I like the move for Montreal. I think it makes a lot of sense, and you hope that Laine can figure it out. I mean, this is a very high draft pick. It's funny that him and Pierre-Luc Dubois have not panned out anywhere, and now they're both having new homes. So it's like that trade didn't really work out for anyone a couple years ago with the Jackets and the Winnipeg Jets. Big news, and I love it. Listen, I love the parody of the NHL when it comes to trades and signings and all that different stuff. So I think this stuff is great. Big fan of that move. Let's get to some more questions, guys, and then we'll get to some more news. Actually, no, before we get to questions, got to plug some stuff on the channel. Shout out to my guy, Taylor. It's the off season, but we're still keeping busy getting stuff up. We got an interview with Chris Tanev, Robert Thomas. Taylor doing a great job clipping some of the discussions we've had here on the show. We'll definitely have to get some stuff clipped here today. Some of the stuff that Avery and I just discussed about the Edmonton Oilers. So, look forward to that. The only problem is not a big fan of the screen grab, but looks like I'm holding my breath. What are you going to do there? Let's get to your questions, everyone, as I'm about to cough. As an Oilers fan on Vancouver Island, it's painful. Where do you? I can't remember if I asked you this. I know Joe Pinione, you've been on the show before, but where in Vancouver Island are you from? I think I told you I went to high school in Vancouver Island, or maybe I didn't. I don't know. Vinny D is a glue guy. Happy to see him get in Vancouver. Tyler Myers and Vinny get paid up. They can just lie across the blue line and make it. Well, the idea with getting Desharnais and Forbert from Boston is they're basically trying to replace Zadorov without having to sign Zadorov. And I've said this before. I have mixed feelings on the Zadorov leaving Vancouver. He was a great locker room guy. He was a great interview, great personality. He was a fan favorite. That part sucks. He's also dynamic. He can hit. He can shoot. He was such a big part of the team last year. I wish they could have found a way to keep him. But I see the other side of it where he's a left shot defenseman. He'd be the third pairing. You can't really pay a third pairing defenseman $5 million a season, which is what he ended up getting in Boston. So it kind of makes sense that you go the cheaper route and hope that Rick Tocchet and Adam Foote and Sergei Gonchar can get something out of both Forbert and Vinny Desharnais. But you can tell the way they want to build these teams. They want them to be big and physical. And Tocchet said it a few seasons ago. They want to be like Vegas, and that's what Vegas has been for years. You got Petrolangelo. They've got so many guys that are physical and also fast as well too. So that's sort of the model they're basing things off of as well. Hope he pans out for Montreal. Talking about Laine, I completely agree. I'd like to see it happen. I mean, you don't want to see guys like high picks. You don't want to see them not pan out. It's better for the league if everyone's playing well and firing on all cylinders and all that stuff. So that's my thought on it. Columbus isn't so much trouble. Well, you know what? I disagree only because they have a lot of cap space. Let's go look at their cap situation right now. And And remember, they have a good GM. Say what you want about some of the moves that Don Waddell made when he was with Atlanta, but with Carolina, he made a lot of good moves that did pan out. Like you look at the Brent Burns trade and, some of the other ones that they've made over the years. They have a ton of cap space. And listen, I've said it once and I'll say it again here on the show. As I take a sip of my coffee and give a dramatic pause. Guys, check this out. They have $15 million, almost $16 million of cap space. That is going to come in handy throughout the season because there's going to be teams that need to unload cap space, especially when training camp starts. There's going to be teams that, maybe are not panning out and they're looking to sell assets. And you can get assets at a good price. Listen, I know Columbus is kind of in a weird spot because like they have Gaudreau and they have obviously signed Sean Monahan and they're looking to take that step forward, but they have a lot of good, Troy, you'll agree with me here. They got a lot of good prospects. They've got some picks. They got some cap space. That's a good catalyst to have going forward. Conversely, with other teams, like we saw the Oilers having to lose 2 young players to cap issues. Canucks have had to basically lost Lindholm and Zadorov in the offseason due to cap issues. Like teams are being affected by this because of cap crunches. It's very good to have cap space in this day and age in the NHL. So I don't think they're in that much trouble because Waddell has time to make moves and make this his team. He just got signed in the summer. Listen, if you're a Columbus fan, I'd feel a lot better about having him at the helm as opposed to Jarkko Kekalainen. Caulfield, Linus, Suzuki on the power play. I know it's going to look good. Ladysmith. Okay, cool. I think I told you I went to high school in Mill Bay. I don't know if I told you that or not. Ladysmith, really nice area. Vancouver Island's beautiful. I love it there. I don't think I could live there because I like the fact that I can drive to the airport, Vancouver International Airport. I can, go to a Canucks game. I can just drive there. I don't have to take the ferry. I like the ferry, but not my favorite thing. But to visit, one of my favorite places on the island, Joe, you'll agree with me here maybe? Parksville. Love Parksville. We used to go there like every year. We used to go to they'd stay at like a resort or something out there. Really, really beautiful area of the island. Shout out to Ladysmith though. Great area. Barrie to Edmonton makes sense to me. Yeah, I'm surprised. I actually was kind of thinking maybe the Canucks could look at him. We had Dave Hall on here a few weeks ago. He mentioned that, Barrie's obviously a Vancouver Island guy, could maybe make his way here. But yeah, Barrie to Edmonton could make sense as well. But what's Edmonton's cap situation right now? I guess with trading Ceci, they have a bit of room. They've got like 900K of cap space. Wow, I thought they'd have more cap space, but they don't because with trading Ceci, they've only got a little bit of cap space. But I believe they were over before, so can't do too much. But we'll see what they decide to do here. Draisaitl will sign 14/8, 14 million a season. Yeah, probably. Bouchard 10/8. Yeah, that's going to be, but how does that all work? McDavid 17/8. Jesus. But okay, aren't you a bit worried though? Like we've seen this with the Leafs where like you sign like a couple players and then it's like you don't have much room for anything else. Like what if Skinner goes down? What if, like Ekholm goes down? Like that's the only problem with signing guys like that. Like you can really load up, but then you worry about like, are you spread too thin in other areas? And I think, speaking as a Canucks fan and someone that follows the Canucks, that's one of the things they've been good with is that they didn't go all in. Like Dave Hall and I talked a couple weeks ago about why didn't they get Jake Getzel? Like if they really wanted him, they could have, maybe given a pick or whatever, like Tampa did, although they don't have any draft capital these days. But, then you get Jake Getzel, then you can't get maybe some defensemen that you want on the back end as well, right? So it's tough to say. You take a cheaper contract and Jake DeBrusk, yes, maybe more risk because you're paying more term, but yeah, it's one of those things where you got to cap space is like a big part of the NHL as far as like the strategy of it and how to manage the cap. And like, listen, Jim Benning, back when it was the Benning era, and I know I talk about him a lot and people are tired of me talking about it, but like he was one of the worst with the cap. Like it's like he didn't care. And they were always over, like you can't be a non-playoff team and be over the cap. Like it's just that, if that's not a sign you're a bad general manager, I don't know what is. McDavid is basically 2 guys. I agree. No, don't get me wrong. It's obviously McDavid's a different story than say like Austin Matthews. Like I know Austin Matthews is a great player, but I think McDavid's better. He can do more. He can, carry a team on your back, even in the playoffs, right? We've seen that. Matthews, not so much, but that's a discussion for another day. Let's look at some other NHL news, guys. Appreciate you tuning in. Again, here's something that we need to talk about as well. Ryan Johansson, contract terminated by the Flyers, and then his agent comes out and says it was basically there was an issue with it. So representatives for Ryan Johansson say they will work out to defend the veteran forward's rights after the Philadelphia Flyers begin to process the terminated his contract. His agent Kurt Overhart says the Flyers' attempt to terminate contract is disappointing. Has a severe hockey injury that requires extensive surgery, which has been scheduled. Since being traded to Philadelphia, Ryan has worked in good faith with the club. So the Flyers are looking to move on from him. Of course, he was a deadline pickup, I think, just to get some cap stuff or whatever. So yeah, curious to see how this unfolds. Johansson, also I believe he's a BC native as well. But he's had some issues. Remember, he was with Nashville originally, and yeah, he's from Vancouver. Remember, he was with Nashville originally, and the thought was they traded him because of some locker room stuff, right? Who did they trade him to? The Avs, and then they retained salary on the Avs trade too. What was that trade last year? Traded and 50% of his retention to the Colorado Avalanche for Alex Galchenyuk. And then we know what happened to Galchenyuk. He's obviously in the KHL now because he can't behave. So yeah, see how that unfolds. So that's some news going on in the world of the NHL right now. What else do we got? 5 free agent steals still on the market. Let's talk about that. Tyson Barrie, who we just mentioned. Who else is on the free agent? Tyler Johnson, the Spokane native. Michael Chiasa's favorite fighter, if any of you MMA fans in here, because obviously from Spokane. Might get a PTO. Kevin LeBlanc, that was a name that was linked to the Canucks for a while. Remember there was the Frank Saravalli last year? I don't know if you guys remember. There was talk about Kevin LeBlanc for Tyler Myers trade last year. That was something that was out there. So don't know if anyone wants to get him. Lankinen, who that's the best goalie available right now. Canucks might be poking around at that. And Kyler Liamamoto, another name that's out there, formerly of Seattle, Edmonton, Detroit. He's bounced around a few times. So those are some big names that are out there right now. I imagine some of these guys have got to get picked up, you would think. But it's always interesting when you see guys that like get like these really big contracts, or like, you know, for years they've been looking good, and then they're a PTO. Like, it's weird now, you know, like Phil Kessel being a PTO now. Remember the Canucks brought him in last year? It's like, that's just so weird to me that here's a guy that was like, remember they were talking about him and Crosby, and now he's on a PTO. He's not even playing anymore. I don't think Kessel's officially retired yet. That's another name I don't know. I haven't heard anyone talk about. I don't really know what's going on there. A bunch of guys took discounts to play with the Oilers. 2 guys tried to go against the grain, and now they're gone. Okay, so I'm glad you brought this up, because Jim Matheson, who's a somewhat controversial Edmonton journalist, couldn't get Jim on the show. I don't really know him, but would love to pick his brain a little bit. But Jim basically said the same thing, that like, yeah, these players didn't, should have signed with the Oilers for less to stay, to show good faith to the club. But then there's another school of thought, which is, and it goes to what you're saying here, Joe, goes against the grain. These guys haven't gotten paid yet, and it might be their only chance to get paid. So that's the question. Like, do you stay with the team and, maybe win a cup or whatever, and then you try and get paid after, or do you get paid now when you have this opportunity? So it's hard, right? Like, you might never get that payday again. We've seen, I can't think of an example right now, but I'm sure we've seen examples of people who have, stayed for less, and then they get injured or something happens, and then they don't end up getting that big payday. So it's a tricky situation. Very tricky situation. We'll have to see. All right. What else you got? Nashville is interesting. I agree. Kyler and Tyler train together. Oh, do they? Where are they training? Where are they training right now? Where's is Barrie training? Where does Barrie train in the offseason? Is he a Kelowna guy? A lot of those players train in Kelowna. I was just up there actually a couple weeks ago. I was telling my wife, I was like, maybe we'll see some hockey players up here, because I know like Tyler Myers, Luke Shen, I know Brent Seabrook, former NHL player, lives up there. Shea Weber. There's a lot of ex-NHLers that hang out in Kelowna because the golf's really good. Obviously, you can get a house for pretty, well, not cheap, but you can get like a mansion out there for a lot less than you would in Vancouver. Yamamoto's too small. He can't push through anyone. I haven't really watched him that much, so you know better than me. The Oilers offered Broberg $4.5 million a season. Someone would have got fired. I agree. Listen, I was fine with them letting Broberg go. Again, this was a guy last year that they weren't that high on. There was talks of trading him last year, and he's getting 4.5. Like, that's almost Zadorov money, right? Zadorov got $5 million a season, and here's Broberg, who hasn't proved anything. How old's Broberg? He's 23, I think. How old is he? Is he like, I mean, for St. Louis, I don't mind it, although I think they're in some cap trouble too. Yeah, he's 23 years old. What's St. Louis's cap situation right now? I think they still even have cap space after all this. Yeah, they got $2 million in cap space. So for them, it's not a big deal. They get a young player. Maybe he can turn into something. The only thing I wonder with Broberg is like all the pressure's on him now. Like, he has to perform. If he doesn't, it's not going to look good, right? Holloway, I love that pickup for them. And St. Louis needs it because they've had a history of some bad draft picks, some bad trades, some things that just haven't worked out. Spokane, that's right. I met Barrie. So Barrie's in Victoria then. Okay, interesting. That's cool. Well, I guess you're an Oilers fan, but I don't know. I would be curious to see if you wanted to work out with the Canucks, see how that would go. Because that's the one thing with the Canucks is like they got like these big physical guys. They don't have a lot of scorers. And that Barry's kind of fits that mold a little bit more, right? But then he's also prone to mistakes. We'll see. I also think there's a school of thought with this coaching group that like they can rehabilitate anyone. Like look at JT Miller. There was talk of trading him and then, he's under Tocchet and he looks great and they're able to do a lot of cool things with him. So there's that side of it too. So yeah, a lot of interesting things. Again, the season is right upon us and very thankful for my guy Taylor letting me do the show every week because it's good for me to just catch up on the news too. Like every day I'm on, The Athletic, Daily Faceoff, like any of the sites trying to see like what's going on. Just trying to see if there's any more news going on in the league. What else? Still nothing on the Leafs. We had, of course, here we go. There's two things I want to talk about. Cole Sillinger, Troy, if you're still in the chat, pretty good contract here. 2-year contract. 2-year, $4.5 million contract, 2.25 AAV. Actually curious. That's kind of a bridge deal, right? Does he, or is he still an RFA after that? I don't even know. Let me just double check this. Let's go look at team info. No, cap projections. No, what are we looking at? Full roster breakdown. Okay, let's go look at the Blue Jackets here real quick. And then we'll talk about Matty Beniers' contract. One of the few wins for Seattle this offseason was Matty Beniers' contract. We'll talk about that in a sec. So, yeah, this is how the Blue Jackets look right now. So Sillinger, 2 more years, and then he's an RFA. Okay, so, yeah, bridge deal, but that's fine because he's still 21. See what he's made of, and then pay him when he's ready. 2.1 is very reasonable. So don't mind that at all. But, yeah, they need to do more. Man, Kent Johnson. I would love if the Canucks could figure out a way to get him, but not going to happen. Adam Fantilli. Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting. And interesting, Provorov's going to be in a UFA after this year, too. Maybe he's a guy they could get something for at the deadline. If there's some room there. Okay, so that is the Blue Jackets. Let's go over to Seattle, where Matty Beniers signed I like Matty Beniers. I was at the Kraken game 2 years ago. Definitely stood out, and they got some cap space as well. Or actually, they have $4,000 in cap space. Which is not much. What did Beniers sign for? 7.1. That's a good contract. He didn't have a very good season last season, but you can see the potential there. And I think this is a guy that could emerge into like the guy for Seattle, if he hasn't already. Flashy player, exciting to watch, fast, good shot. 7.1, very reasonable. You're getting him till 2031, so you're getting, 4 seasons out of him. Oh, wow, I thought it was longer. So they've only got him for 4 seasons, then he's a UFA. You know what, though? He didn't have a good season last year. Like, what's the ceiling on him, Maybe you don't bet on him that much. Maybe you just do 4 seasons and you see what happens. So I like the term, though. 7.1, that's fine. It's the Chandler Stevenson one at 6.2 and the Montour at 7.1 that I'm kind of like, ugh. Like, Montour is 3 years older than Vince Dunn. And Vince Dunn's like, to me, they were talking about this on the radio this morning. Like, I think Vince Dunn is probably right now the guy in Seattle. Like, if you think of like their best player, it's probably him. So, yeah. The problem with Seattle is like they haven't made any like big splashes or like, they're just kind of like a boring team, Like they're just not like not boring in the way they play. And I'm intrigued to see how they look under Bylsma. I think it'll look a lot better, but like they just don't like, they haven't gone out I almost wish not that this would have ever happened, but I wish they would have like made a pitch for like Steven Stamkos, like something to get them excited. I just feel like this is a very like, I don't know what the word is. There's nothing about this team that really excites me. Like, what's going on with Shane Wright? I know he's 20, but like, is he going to pan out at all? I don't know. There's a lot of question marks here with Seattle. Let's get back to Joe's question. Remember when Peter C gave Mikko a contract and they got fired the next day between periods? That was basically the same amount of games Broberg has played. That's true. I really like the approach Don Waddell has signed with free agents. He basically gave everyone a bridge deal. We have about $16 million in cap space. Exactly. And again, cap space is very, very, very valuable right now when it comes to the league because you need cap space. You want to have that flexibility. Like there's so many teams that either lose players or they can't have any flexibility throughout the season. And then you got to think of injuries. Like that's what the Canucks are doing this season. That's why they're not putting Tucker Poolman on LTIR. They want to be able to have some flexibility and maybe take on an LTIR contract or whatever, right? So that's why they're kind of taking a different approach to this season. Yeah, 7.1 is a great contract there. It would never happen, but would love to have a player like Travis Konechny and Columbus Blue Jackets. He's with Philly. He just signed a contract, didn't he? Konechny? Well, the Flyers are over the cap. I didn't even realize that. Although is that counting the termination? I'm assuming it is. Konechny's at 5 point. Wow, so he's at 5.5 this season, then he goes to 8.7. He's up in 4 more seasons. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the Flyers. They're kind of a weird team. I love John Tortorella though. That's like must-see TV. Troy, you even know this. I'm sure you had it with Columbus. We only got 1 season of Tortorella here in Vancouver, but he was great. Tortorella lives in this small. When he was in Vancouver, he lived in this small town that's close to where I go, like pretty much every week to get my gas because it's only 5 minutes away. Little strip of land in Washington State called Point Roberts. It's like a really small town. It's just like a nice, quiet, small town. But Tortorella lived there when he coached in Vancouver, which is always like kind of the joke here. Seattle's GM didn't do great with the expansion draft after Vegas set an example. Kraken really screwed up. That's Ron Francis, by the way, former GM of the Carolina Hurricanes. And yeah, he was just I thought he played it too safe. Like that's how I looked at it. Like you look at who's the GM in Seattle? Vegas. Why am I drawing a blank right now? I might have to look this up. I can't believe I'm drawing a blank right now. I believe he's from British Columbia anyways. The guy who runs the team. I was thinking Kevin Cheveldale, but that's Winnipeg. What's his name? I got to look this up. I can't believe I forgot this guy's name. Las Vegas GM. Not George McPhee. He's the president. Kelly McCrimmon. That's what I'm thinking of. And no, he's not from BC. He's from Saskatchewan. Why did I think otherwise? I don't know. Yeah, Kelly McCrimmon. I love him as a GM because this guy takes swings when he... Like they made some, and granted, some of that was just like some teams making some bad trades. Like remember Dale Talon giving up like some. Who was it they got from Florida? Was it? Let me look here. Las Vegas expansion draft. Was it Marchessault? Who did they end up getting from? Let me see who they ended up getting. Florida. Who was I thinking of that they got from Florida? And I remember just being like, what the hell? Or it was a trade from Florida. So they got, let me just look up Florida. Yeah, Marchessault. That's who they got. So they got Marchessault, and then they made a couple trades too. Yeah, they traded Riley Smith as well. So, yeah. They got a couple good give-me's there from some other teams, but yeah, I'm just looking at what team they have. They don't even like this team. Like look at. I'm going to show you guys this quickly. What the Vegas team looked like. And granted, this was 2017, so we're 7 years removed from the. I can't believe it's been 7 years since Vegas came into the league. But look at this team. Like I'm pretty sure there's like no one on this team left from the original Vegas team. Look at this: Calvin Pickard, Sviva, Merrill, William. Carrier, I think is still with Vegas. Yeah, Eakin, Marchessault, McNabb. I think McNabb's still with. Yeah, still with them. James Neal. Geez, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Derek Englund. Mark Mathot. Yeah, totally different team now. William Karlsson, I think, is still with them. Marc-Andre Fleury, Nate Schmidt. Yeah, so pretty interesting to see what Vegas has done over the last little bit. I love Torts. He's a legend. I agree. That's why I'm happy. We have Dean Evison because they have similar traits. Yeah, he's like a no-nonsense guy, which I think is really great. So certainly a fan of that coaching style. McPhee. Yeah, McPhee's the president, but McCrimmon is the GM. Look at Vegas opening Russell in Seattle. It's nuts. They should have taken the right shot defense, take most valuable players. I agree. I think they were too patient. And here's the thing too, that like I'm kind of disappointed by. Like I want Seattle to be good, like because I want a rivalry. Like we have Edmonton as our rival now, but like I would love to see a Canucks Seattle rivalry at some point. I want Seattle to get good. Like it wasn't good for the league or for the Canucks or for anyone that they took a step back last year. So I hope they can improve. I hope the moves work out for them. And I want Seattle to do well. At this point now, I'm like rooting for Seattle because like they're not a rival yet of the Canucks, but eventually I'd like to like not like them and still like want to go to games in enemy territory. It'd be cool. Seattle's an expensive ticket though. That's why I haven't been back. Remember I went there for a game a couple of years ago. The tickets in Seattle were more expensive than tickets I've gotten in Vegas before. And also the food and drinks were super pricey. I think I paid like $20-something US for like a small drink. It was called it was a Kraken drink. So I was like, I got to get the Kraken drink just because it's, it's a thing. But yeah, it was just pricey to go down there. But 3-hour drive for me. Ate dinner beforehand. It worked out. Want them to be good too. Look at the standings. It's reversed from 7 years ago. That's how the draft lottery works. I agree. Guys, let's get a few more questions here. We'll take off a tad bit early on the show. I do have another interview coming up here in about 5 minutes. So got to go take care of that. Again, we're going to have Troy on the show next week to actually, you know what? I think I have a dentist appointment next week now that I just looked at it. I do. Might have to bump the show like 30 minutes next week. So Troy, I'll be in your DMs next week. I just realized that I might have to push the show like 30 minutes next week, but I will be back next week. It's just a matter of like figuring out the time and all that stuff. So let's get like 2 more questions, guys, and then we'll get out of here. Troy, if you're still in here, Joe, if you're still in here, if you got any other questions, we'll wrap this up a little bit early. What's on your mind, guys? Anything you're excited for the season? I'm looking into, I was just talking to my buddy this morning. I told you guys I'm planning on going to Utah to go see the Canucks play their very first game there on December 17th. And then the plan is to go down to Utah, stay a night or 2 there, go see the game, and then fly from Utah to Vegas and see the Knights play the night after against the Canucks. It's going to be a fun little road trip, me and my buddy. Every year we go to Vegas and see the Canucks play, so figured we'd add in the Utah trip as well. So looking forward to that, guys. That's one of my favorite things to do, is to go to other cities and watch the Canucks play, and it hasn't worked out well. So last year, I think I told the story, we were going to go to Vegas in March to see the Canucks play, and that would have worked out better for me because I had to go cover the UFC that year too, like a week later. But my buddy couldn't. He had a trade show to go to. So we had to go to the other Vegas game, which was later, and that was the one closer to the UFC event. And that's the one where the Knights beat the Canucks like 5-2. It was just like a really, really, really crappy performance. So that wasn't fun. But I went the year before, and the Canucks won like 6-1 or something, and that was cool. There's nothing better than being in another city and your team wins, and then like you have all these other people that obviously traveled for the game, and they're all wearing jerseys. It's a lot of fun. Which Canucks superstar are you most concerned about this upcoming season? Elias Pettersson. There's no question. It's Pettersson. Like, he's got to get it going. His big contract kicks in this year. If he has anything close to what he looked like at the tail half of last season, it's going to be just an absolute disaster, and it's going to be a really long season if he doesn't perform well. So I'm hoping whatever it is he was dealing with, I know it was tendonitis and all this different stuff, he's got to figure it out. But you got to play like an $11 million player. Like, he didn't look anything close to that last year. So it's him. If I'm Patrick Alvine, I'm hiring the best sports psychologist in the world. I'm getting him like every day in the offseason, like working on stuff. Like, he's got to be better. He's got to be an impact player. Like, if he was even remotely an impact player in the playoffs last year, I am convinced we would have beat Edmonton in the, and I shouldn't say we, I'm trying to be this hockey journalist now, and I got to quit saying we as the Canucks. So it would be great if the Canucks could get something out of Pettersson. And I'm hoping, Jake DeBrusk will give some life into Pettersson as well. I think that's the idea, is that he'll play with him. Who will take a step back with the Canucks this season? I don't know. Let me look at the roster. I hope it's not Dakota Joshua, but I could see Dakota Joshua maybe not being as dynamic as he was last year. That'll be my pick. Very excited to see which prospects make NHL rosters on all teams. Me as well. Is Macklin Celebrini going to start with the San Jose Sharks this year? I'm assuming he will, but you never know. Maybe they feel like he needs more seasoning. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Okay, good time to end the show here today, guys. Appreciate you tuning in. We should be back our regular time. I might have to go at 12:30 Eastern next week. Troy, I'll be in your DMs. Like I said, I just got a notification. I got a dentist appointment, and I forgot I booked it. So I think I got to do that, and I might be a little bit late to come here for noon. So I might have to do the show at 12:30. But either way, we'll be doing a show next week. Just keep an eye on my Twitter feed. That's at Lynch on Sports, or keep an eye on this channel. I will have an update on here for sure. I hope you guys have a great rest of your Wednesday. I will see you guys next week. We'll be talking Columbus Blue Jackets with Troy. Excited for that. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you guys soon.